10 minutes before the hearing, my father stood at the head of the dining table and said it calmly, like he was reading a weather report. My brother gets everything. The house, the watches, the accounts, all of Grandpa's life reduced to a clean handover. Then he looked at me and added that I deserved what I'd always been given, an unlovable burden. I didn't react. My spine stayed straight. My hands stayed folded in my lap. I felt the words land and spread, slow and heavy, like wet cement setting inside my chest. My brother leaned back in his chair, already wearing Grandpa's watch. The leather strap had been resized. That detail told me everything. This wasn't a decision made today. This had been planned, practiced, rehearsed without me. My mother busied herself with the coffee cups. She always found something to wipe when she didn't want to speak. The table smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. Grandpa used to polish it himself. Every Sunday morning, he said a table remembered who ate at it. My father kept talking. He explained it like a lesson. He said my brother needed stability. He said I was independent, resilient, difficult. He said Grandpa would have wanted this if he'd understood the reality of who I was. I stared at the grain of the table and let him finish. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. If you've ever been treated like this by family, hit like and subscribe, because this story proves what happens when you stop staying silent. The lawyer wasn't there yet. That mattered to me. It didn't matter to them. They were already dividing ghosts. My brother cleared his throat and added his piece. He said it wasn't personal. He said I should be grateful Dad was giving me anything at all. He said burdens weren't worthless, just heavy. I nodded once. Not agreement, just acknowledgement. I'd learned young that silence made them uncomfortable. Silence made them explain themselves. And explanation always revealed more than anger ever could. I thought of Grandpa in the hospital bed, the way his hand squeezed mine when the machines beeped too loudly. I thought of the envelope he pressed into my palm weeks before he died, his voice low, careful. I thought of how he told me to wait, to listen, to trust paper over promises. I stayed still. My father finally noticed my quiet and mistook it for surrender. His shoulders relaxed. He sat down. Victory always softened him. He reached for his coffee and said we'd sign once the lawyer arrived. He said there was no need for drama. Drama. That word had followed me my whole life. Whenever I asked why my brother got forgiveness and I got consequences. Whenever I asked why Grandpa's birthday calls were returned to him, but mine were monitored. Whenever I asked why love felt conditional in this house. The doorbell rang. The sound cut clean through the room. Sharp. Final. The lawyers arrived together, briefcases in hand, polite smiles fixed in place. They smelled like rain and paper. Real authority. The kind that didn't raise its voice. Everyone straightened. My father stood. My brother removed the watch and tucked his wrist under the table, suddenly cautious. We sat again, chairs scraping, breath held. The lawyer began with formalities. Names, dates, the will hearing scheduled for later that morning. He said this meeting was procedural. He said nothing had been finalized. My father interrupted him and summarized the arrangement. He spoke with confidence, with ease. He spoke like a man used to being believed. The lawyer listened. He didn't nod. He didn't object. He just looked at me once, briefly, and then back at my father. I noticed that. My mother finally sat down. Her hands trembled slightly. She clasped them together to stop it. She still wouldn't look at me. The lawyer asked if anyone had additional documents to submit before the hearing. The room went quiet. This was the moment Grandpa had prepared me for. This was the pause he told me to respect. He said truth liked patience. He said lies rushed. I reached into my bag. The zipper sounded louder than it should have. Everyone's eyes followed my hands. My brother frowned, annoyed more than worried. My father tilted his head, curious. I pulled out the document. Thick paper. Official. Stamped. I didn't speak. I slid it across the table toward the lawyer. It stopped in front of my father instead. He glanced down. Just a glance. That was all it took. The color drained from his face so fast it startled me. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His hand hovered over the paper but didn't touch it. My brother leaned forward. He reached for the document. The lawyer raised his hand gently. He picked it up himself. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. The lawyer read in silence. His expression didn't change. That scared them more than shouting ever could. My father swallowed hard. My mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were wide, questioning, afraid. I met her gaze and held it. The lawyer cleared his throat. He said the document was valid. He said it had been filed correctly. He said it changed the distribution entirely. My brother laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. He said that wasn't possible. He said Dad had already handled everything. The lawyer looked at him and said calmly that Grandpa had handled everything. I felt my heart beat in my ears, but my voice stayed inside, quiet, controlled. This wasn't revenge. This was timing. My father finally spoke my name. He said it like a warning, like a plea. I said nothing. The lawyer explained that Grandpa had amended his will 3 months before his death. He explained the conditions. He explained the reasons, though he didn't need to. My father stared at the paper like it might disappear if he looked away. The hearing was no longer 10 minutes away. It had already begun. And for the first time in that house, I wasn't the one being explained. The lawyer folded the document once and placed it neatly back on the table, like he was setting down a loaded object. He didn't rush. He didn't soften his tone. He treated it like what it was. Final. My father sat back slowly, as if the chair might break under him. He asked for clarification, though his voice already knew the answer. He asked if there had been a mistake. He asked if there was another version. The lawyer said no. He said Grandpa had been very clear. My brother started talking fast. He said Grandpa was confused near the end. He said paperwork could be manipulated. He said I'd always been good with details, implying something without saying it outright. I watched him unravel. He'd never needed composure before. He'd always been protected by proximity, by being the son, by being easier to love. The lawyer shut that down without raising his voice. He said Grandpa had completed a cognitive assessment the same week the amendment was signed. He said 2 witnesses were present. He said everything was recorded. Silence fell again, thicker this time. My mother pressed her palm to her mouth. She whispered my name like it was fragile, like it might break if she said it louder. I didn't look at her. The lawyer continued. He said the original will had been replaced entirely. He said the distribution was no longer equal, nor was it traditional. My father laughed once. It came out wrong. Dry. He said Grandpa wouldn't punish his own son. The lawyer corrected him. He said this wasn't punishment. He said it was intention. That word landed hard. Intention meant thought. Time. Choice. It meant Grandpa saw everything we pretended he didn't. The lawyer turned the document so everyone could see. My name was printed clearly. No ambiguity. No margin for interpretation. The house went to me. The accounts were split, but not evenly. Grandpa had left notes explaining why. Not emotional notes, practical ones. Dates, amounts, patterns. My brother received something. Not nothing, just not everything. Enough to expose the lie that this was about fairness. My father received nothing. That was the part no one had prepared for. My father stood up so abruptly his chair tipped back. He asked how this could be possible. He demanded to know when this was done. He demanded to know why no one told him. The lawyer said Grandpa had requested privacy. He said it was his right. My father turned to me. His face had hardened into something familiar. Accusatory. Injured. He said I'd turned Grandpa against him. He said I'd poisoned the last months of his life. I felt something twist in my chest, but it didn't show. I'd mourned Grandpa honestly. I wasn't going to defend myself now. I remembered sitting beside Grandpa's bed while my father canceled visits. I remembered my brother missing calls. I remembered the way Grandpa watched the door anyway. The lawyer asked everyone to sit. No one listened. My brother pointed at me and said I'd planned this. He said I'd waited. He said I'd been quiet on purpose. He was right about one thing. I had waited. I waited because Grandpa told me to. I waited because truth needed space. I waited because reacting early would have ruined everything. My mother stepped between us. She asked me why I hadn't told her. Her voice cracked. She said she could have fixed this. Fixed. That word again. I finally spoke. Just once. I said Grandpa didn't want fixing. He wanted follow-through. The room stilled. The lawyer announced that the formal hearing would still proceed, but the outcome was now largely procedural. He said any disputes would have to be filed through the court. My father scoffed. He said he'd fight it. He said blood mattered. The lawyer nodded and said that was his right. He also said Grandpa had anticipated that response. He said there was a clause addressing contests. My brother asked what kind of clause. The lawyer said a simple one. Anyone who challenged the will forfeited their share. That was when my brother sat down. He stared at the table, jaw tight. He was calculating. Always calculating. My father looked at my mother, searching for support. She didn't give it. She looked tired. Older than she had an hour ago. The lawyer began packing his briefcase. He said he'd see us at the hearing. He said if anyone had further documents, they should be submitted now. No one moved. As they walked toward the door, my father called after them. He asked if there was any flexibility, any room for adjustment. The lawyer stopped and turned. He said Grandpa had been flexible his whole life. This was the adjustment. The door closed behind them. The house felt hollow, like it had exhaled and forgotten how to breathe back in. My brother stood up and left the room without looking at me. His footsteps were fast, angry, familiar. My father stayed. He lowered himself back into the chair. He stared at the spot where the document had been. He said I'd embarrassed him. That was his takeaway. I picked up my bag. I said nothing. I walked toward the door. My mother followed me into the hallway. She asked me if this was what I wanted. I stopped. I turned. I told her it wasn't about wanting. It was about being seen. She didn't answer. I stepped outside. The air was cold, clean, real. For the first time since Grandpa died, I felt steady. The hearing would come. The consequences would settle. This wasn't the end. But the balance had shifted. And they all knew it. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. No drama, no raised benches, just a long table, padded chairs, and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly unwell. The kind of place where truth didn't echo. It just sat there. My father arrived first. He took the seat closest to the head of the table, out of habit more than strategy. My brother came in next and dropped into a chair beside him, arms crossed, jaw set. They didn't acknowledge me when I walked in. They didn't have to. The space between us did it for them. My mother came last. She sat apart from everyone. That felt new. The lawyer greeted us and began. He reviewed the will again, slowly, clearly, like he was reading instructions that had already been followed. Dates, signatures, witnesses, amendments. I watched my father's hands. They shook when he tried to steady them on the table. That wasn't anger. That was loss of control. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't argue the facts. He argued the feeling. He said the will didn't reflect family values. He said Grandpa had been manipulated by grief. He said the distribution would tear us apart. No one responded to that. The lawyer reminded him that values weren't enforceable. Intent was. My brother leaned forward and said he just wanted fairness. He said Grandpa would have wanted peace. The lawyer asked him if he intended to contest the will. The room held its breath. My brother looked at my father. My father gave him a small nod, encouragement disguised as confidence. My brother said yes. The lawyer paused. He repeated the clause, slowly, carefully. Anyone who contested would forfeit their inheritance entirely. My brother's face strained. He tried to walk it back. He said he hadn't understood. He said he meant discussion, not contest. The lawyer said words mattered. The clerk wrote something down. That was it. My brother slumped back in his chair. The calculation ended. There was nothing left to solve. My father exploded then. He stood, shouting that this was extortion, that I'd orchestrated this to strip them of everything, that blood should override paper. The lawyer asked him to sit. He didn't. The clerk warned him once. My father sat. The lawyer turned to me and asked if I had anything to add. I said no. I didn't need to justify myself. Grandpa already had. The hearing ended without ceremony. No gavel, no speeches, just signatures and finality. Outside, my brother paced the hallway. He wouldn't look at me. He kept running his hand through his hair like he could erase the last 10 minutes. My father stood near the window, staring out at the parking lot. He looked smaller there, less certain. My mother approached me quietly. She asked me if I was happy. I told her I was calm. She nodded like she understood the difference. The lawyer handed me copies of everything. He said I'd be contacted about transferring the house and accounts. He said Grandpa had been thorough. I believed him. As I walked out, I passed my brother. He finally spoke. He asked me how long I'd known. I told him long enough. He asked why I hadn't warned him. I said Grandpa had asked me not to. That ended the conversation. Driving away, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heavy. Inheritance wasn't money. It was memory, and memory came with weight. The house would be mine. The house where Grandpa taught me how to fix a leaky faucet, where he showed me how to read contracts slowly, where he told me love wasn't proven by words. I realized then that the real inheritance wasn't the assets, it was the clarity. They'd chosen their roles years ago. I'd just stopped accepting mine. That night, my phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. I slept deeply for the first time since Grandpa died. The house sat at the end of a quiet street, exactly where Grandpa had left it. Same mailbox. Same crooked oak out front. The key felt heavier than it should have when I slid it into the lock for the first time as the owner. I didn't rush inside. I stood there and listened. No voices. No expectations. Just the soft hum of a place that had been waiting. When I stepped in, the air smelled like dust and old books. Grandpa's smell. I closed the door behind me and let the silence settle. My phone buzzed almost immediately. My mother. I didn't answer. I walked through the living room slowly. The couch was still draped with the blanket he liked, the one with the frayed edge. I ran my fingers over it without sitting down. I wasn't here to relive anything. I was here to close something. The first week passed quietly. Paperwork, transfers, meetings that felt mechanical. The lawyer kept his tone neutral, but I could tell he respected Grandpa's foresight. He said most people waited too long to be honest. My brother texted once. A single line. He said he hoped I was satisfied. I didn't respond. Satisfaction wasn't what this was. Satisfaction implied hunger. I wasn't hungry anymore. My father showed up unannounced the following Saturday. I saw his car from the window. Same model, same impatience in the way he parked too close to the curb. I didn't move right away. I finished washing my hands. I dried them carefully. When I opened the door, he didn't greet me. He looked past me, into the house. Assessing, claiming. He said he wanted to talk. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. That irritated him. He asked why I was acting like a stranger. He said this was still his father's house. He said I didn't need to shut him out. I told him I wasn't shutting him out. I was setting a boundary. That word landed wrong. He'd never liked it. Boundaries meant limits. Limits meant loss of authority. He said Grandpa would be ashamed of what I'd done. He said I'd torn the family apart over paper. I reminded him that Grandpa had written the paper. He said I was being cold. I told him I'd learned from the best. That was when his anger shifted. It turned inward. He looked tired, confused. He asked me why Grandpa hadn't trusted him. I almost told him the truth then. Almost told him about the cancelled visits, the unanswered calls, the way Grandpa had waited. Instead, I said Grandpa trusted actions. My father had no answer for that. He left without asking to come inside. My mother came a few days later. She knocked softly. She waited. I let her in. She walked through the house like it might reject her. She sat on the edge of a chair instead of the couch. She apologized without specifics. She said she hadn't known how bad it had been. I believed she believed that. She asked me if there was any chance of fixing things. I told her fixing wasn't my job anymore. She cried quietly, not theatrically, just tired tears. I didn't stop her. I didn't comfort her either. When she left, the house felt lighter. Weeks passed, then months. The accounts settled. The watch Grandpa had worn every day sat in a drawer. I didn't wear it. I didn't need to. I sold some things. I kept others. I didn't feel guilty. Grandpa had trusted me to decide. My brother stopped reaching out. My father stopped pretending. At night, I sat at the old dining table and worked. The same table where everything had started. The same table that remembered who ate at it. I realized then that I wasn't angry anymore. Anger required energy. I'd spent mine surviving. What I felt now was something steadier, quieter, like ground under my feet. The inheritance hadn't changed me. It had revealed me. And for the first time, that was enough. The first winter in the house was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Snow came early that year. It softened the street, slowed everything down. I let it. I didn't host holidays. I didn't invite anyone out of obligation. I spent Thanksgiving alone with a simple meal and Grandpa's old radio playing low in the background. Christmas passed the same way. No drama. No phone calls that left me shaking. My father sent a card. No apology. Just his name at the bottom, written larger than necessary. I put it in a drawer and forgot about it. In January, the final documents arrived. Everything was complete. No pending disputes. No appeals. Grandpa's planning had worked exactly as he intended. The lawyer called once more to confirm. He congratulated me, then paused. He said Grandpa had left one last instruction. Not legal, personal. He asked if I wanted to hear it. I said yes. He read it slowly. Grandpa wrote that he wasn't leaving me the house because I needed it. He wrote that he was leaving it to me because I'd already been carrying the weight without recognition. He wrote that fairness wasn't about balance. It was about honesty. I thanked the lawyer and hung up. That night, I sat at the dining table and let myself cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let it move through me and go. Spring came. I planted new flowers along the front fence. I fixed the loose step Grandpa always said he'd get to. I made the house mine without erasing him. My brother drove by once. He didn't stop. I saw him slow down, then keep going. That was closure enough. My mother called occasionally. Our conversations stayed careful, polite, limited. We talked about weather, about work, about nothing that required reopening old wounds. I didn't push for more. My father never called again. And that told me everything. One afternoon, I found an old photo tucked into a book on Grandpa's shelf. It was the two of us at the kitchen table. I was young, serious, holding a pen like it mattered. Grandpa was smiling at me like he already knew something I didn't. I kept the photo. I didn't frame it. I slipped it back into the book. Some things don't need to be displayed to be honored. The house stopped feeling like an inheritance and started feeling like a home. Not because of the walls or the land or the accounts, but because there was no one left inside it who questioned my right to be there. That was the real shift. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I'd been chosen already, quietly, deliberately, by someone who saw me clearly when others didn't bother. The family didn't come back together. There was no apology tour, no dramatic reconciliation. Just distance. And distance, I learned, can be a form of peace. On the anniversary of Grandpa's death, I didn't visit the cemetery. I stayed home. I cooked dinner at the table he polished every Sunday. I ate slowly. I let the table remember me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was done. and that felt like justice.